Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by James Wagoner. He is the CEO and co-founder of Joule Case, a startup aiming to make advanced power systems simple. He built his first battery startup out of college, and that resulted in a $1.2 billion contract with Spain. But unfortunately, that had to be canceled due to the austerity from the financial crisis. Outside of work, James enjoys attending music festivals, long-distance cycling, backpacking, and skiing when he's not building battery systems. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So power-based companies are something that most people don't really think about when they think about startups. Most people think about the domain of like software just because it's easy to scale. But what made you go down the route of hardware-based entrepreneurship?
Uh, I've always kind of been a hardware guy. So, mechanical engineering degree, undergrad, and I like to kind of see, touch, and feel things. And the problems that I see, the significant problems that I want to solve, require a solution that is not software based. There's certainly going to be some software elements to it, but whether it's just the electrification of energy, the transition away from fossil fuels is can't be solved with just software.
And how did you go from so wanting to build a startup right after college is a relatively soon gap. Like, how did you close that gap from, hey, I just studied engineering in class in like a theoretical setting to like, I want to start my own company?
All credit and kudos goes to my co-founder Alex on that. So we met freshman year of college, and he has a true entrepreneur mind, a true kind of visionary state, and we have a terrific partnership in the sense that he's imagining the future 10 years down the road, and then I'm the guy that executes around what that means for today, tomorrow, next week. And then so he's talking to me about some stuff just kind of up in the air, kind of in college, coming right out of college. And I have a personality where it's like, okay, like, you're saying all these things, don't waste your breath, let's go do it. Let's go get it done. And then so kind of mixing my kind of determination to just get things done with his determination of actually really imagining that future, or being thoughtful about is the best solution, meant that we kind of went down that path. And kudos to him in terms of really being in it, being able to really communicate that message. And then especially with that first startup, it was really him. And then I'm on the sidelines, kind of, along for the ride. But, to your point, David, um, I was much more kind of career focused, or just kind of company, yeah, you work for a big company focused. When you're 22 years old, but you're also 22 years old and you don't know anything, and you think you can just go and build something. So, despite being, having that youth and that optimism means that you can do some things that maybe when you are 40, you're not even going to attempt. And then so that's why that value of a young founder, they're a lot more flexible, they're a lot more hardworking, right? They're not experienced, but what they can kind of imagine is much more significant, back then than what I would do right now.
So you mentioned your co-founder having this 10-year vision. Do you have a 10-year vision for Joule as of now?
Oh yeah. And it's something that is very exciting. Joule Case is building that product platform, the standard architecture to be the Lego blocks
Mhm.
of power for all of your emergency temporary portable backup power, right? Having one form factor to solve for a tailgate, a camping trip, your home backup, a food truck, wherever you're going to need that backup power, a portable or temporary power application. So, as that solution right now, all of our energy is based on fossil fuels,
Mhm.
and we know we can't do that. Much well, we can't. We really need to stop right now. Admittedly, right? I'm in Seattle, and we just had a 110-degree day, right? So we need to stop that immediately. But when you transition away from that, you have an opportunity to establish the standard or the form factor. So I like to reference this journey that society is experiencing, and have an historical reference to what happened, in the early 1900s, right? The horseless carriage, and the standardization of fossil fuel energy was quite a journey. But what we've landed on is, you have your 85, 87, 91 octane gasoline, you got diesel, whatever. But that's not necessarily what started, what was the start. And if you were to drive your horseless carriage 30 miles down the road, the likelihood of them having the actual energy form factor that you needed back in the day was pretty rare.
Hmm.
So now, as we transition away from fossil fuels, let's build the form factor, the product platform that solves for all of these. So you can use this across multiple different applications. It's got multiple different value propositions. So, there's a Joule case in every home and for every portable temporary power application. And the uses are varied and they're increasing, right? Our dependence upon technology and, what a tailgate or a campsite looks like now in 2021 versus 1990. Right. And that's just going to become greater as more and more technology gets integrated into our lives. So the need for Joule Case is just going to increase. And let's build something that doesn't just solve for one discrete problem. Let's build something that solves for all of your problems.
Hmm. And was this your was the current iteration of the product the MVP, or did you have previous existing versions that led to the current iteration that consumers can access?
So the current product that's selling on our website today is our fifth version of this product. And that in true fifth version that's been built, sold to customers, and incorporate that feedback back into our product. And we're working on our sixth version now as well, that will be launching shortly. But yeah, we've been at this for a while, right? Alex and I have been working on Joule Case since 2015. And just, it's terrific to talk to customers and really get out there face to face and really understand what it means to have something that solves for all of these different use cases. And you can't just, be focused on one. You have to, imagine what that looks like. If you're trying to build out this vision that I'm describing, then, that means you have to, understand what that means to power a food truck versus a campsite. And there's a lot of differences when you compare those two, for example.
So 2015 and now is, call it, roughly 6 years, and effectively you're on your sixth revision, or soon to release your sixth revision. So is it averaging close effectively once per year? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's kind of been once per year. And that's, and then it's not that, we've been fortunate to have customers that have been coming alongside on us with this journey. So, that's also been really great.
Hmm. So I think one of the things that a lot of people like about the startup world is that, like, you can get customer feedback today and implement features tomorrow. How long, or what's the fastest in the world of physical equipment you can close that, like, communication loop?
That is incredibly challenging. And I mean, it can be as long as 3 years, and it can be as short as a couple months. And there's some tricks, there's some hacks that you can do to make that possible. It also, you know, we've been very scrappy in the sense of how we actually continue to build our product, and understanding that we're not landed on anything yet, right? Like we're building an MVP and then iterating on that, but it also means that we're not trying to invest in the capital for production tooling.
I see.
And then so you build some stuff, you get it out there, you sell it, right? It's sold, and then you get that feedback and allows you to iterate. Now, if you're trying to move, 10,000 units and then getting that feedback, that's going to be much more expensive, and that's going to be a much longer process. But I would say, the lessons learned that we just learned because we're dealing with immediate problems of how to evolve the product with the constraints that we have, whatever it is, right, and multiple different types of constraints, has meant that we have been very scrappy and innovative, and taken hardware and made it so that we've been able to advance the product substantially since when we first started.
So have you worked with manufacturing and, I guess, distribution lines prior to the startup, or is this relatively new to you?
So we worked with manufacturing, distribution, engineering in R2EV, right? So our first startup right after college, and then also both Alex and I worked on it kind of in between in our professional careers. So a couple of different companies for Alex, and then for me, primarily Fluke Electronics is what my most
Hmm.
recent experience was there. So um, there's we're referencing a lot of experience with that, but you also that whole marketplace will, or that dynamic will change. And if, for example, the tariffs, right, that were imposed by the previous administration, and how much that changed the dynamic across the board, and that still has lasting effects. For example.
So how did you so I guess as college grads, how did you figure out like, hey, I have these specs. Now I need someone to manufacture it. Like that's like quite a wide jump from having a spec sheet to a physical product. Can you walk us through some of the steps you had to go through?
Yeah, how long do I have, right?
As much
But
as you want.
you know, it it is a it is many, many conversations. Um, it is a factor. I mean, I think the biggest thing that that we kept asking ourselves as you go down this path, that I think a lot of I see a lot of entrepreneurs not necessarily do, is that you're at a point where you have the industrial design, everything's mocked up, right, and maybe you've done the internal engineering, or maybe you've hired some firm, and then you say, okay, well, the next step is now I got to go build this, and now I have to go spend this capital outlay, and that's not the path that Alex and I chose.
Hmm.
We kept pushing back and saying, well, this is still not what we want it to be. This is still not what we want it to be, and keep asking questions and keep kind of delaying that and thinking about it and grinding on it, right, and processing and saying, okay, what do we do? And then also, what can we do as a stair step approach, right? So what can we do to baby step this, and
Hmm.
maybe bite off one little area that we're very confident that we have landed very firmly on, and then here's this other area that not that we have an answer for, but there's a feeling that it could get better, right? But so as you do that, we, like I said, don't invest in the tooling that we haven't, have a modular approach. Now all of that takes longer, and I wouldn't necessarily say this is not the fastest way to go about it, but now, 6 years later, we are very in tune with our customers. We're very in tune with what the product actually means, and it's exciting for right now, but when you're in the throes of it, it's not exciting, and it kind of depends on what you have, right, at the point that someone throws a couple million at you for a seed round. They're not going to let you bootstrap the way that Joule Case did for the many years that we did.
Hmm. Can you walk me through the journey of acquiring your initial batch of customers?
Uh, so so we launched an Indiegogo campaign in 2015. So it's propping up a video. It was doing all of that internal marketing work around that. Now at this point in time, it's just Alex and I, and it's self-funded, bootstrapped. We didn't feel confident in working with any of these marketing firms that wanted money up front, and just there's a lot of across along the startup journey, there's many sharks across many different ways, right? So there's none of these marketing companies that we thought were someone that we could trust and spend the time, a fortune amount of money for Joule Case at the time. And then so we launched ourselves, did all of the work, launched our own website, did all of our work there as well. That Without any type of marketing budget, it didn't work out. But
Hmm.
then we were found by the Discovery Channel in a show called All American Makers,
Hmm.
and that was incredibly exciting for us, because then we actually got on TV. We're able to demonstrate our product on this show, and and coming out of that show, there were a lot of phone calls. And
Or did
so we
they
found
discovered
our,
you? How?
it's a casting director that is trying to find, companies. It's a show called All American Makers, but it's companies in America that are building something.
Hmm.
And so they found us based on this crowdfunding campaign,
Oh.
and then they reached out to us, and actually we thought it was a scam, right? We didn't believe them that they actually were. They're like, hey, we're part of this. We're part of the Discovery Channel, and yeah, of course this is going to work out, and we're going to fly you to Brooklyn, and just make sure you're all ready. And we get on these phone calls and be like, okay, well, where's our plane tickets? Like you say, you're going to fly us to Brooklyn. Where's our plane tickets? Where's our hotel? And they're like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. And it's like, okay, well, this would be exciting, but we're not going to, this seems like a scam. We're not going to build out our product unless we know that we're actually going to go there. And then about a week right before our scheduled date, they're like, "Oh, here's your plane tickets. Now just get on the plane a week from now, right?" And then we had to scramble to actually build what we said that we had on the phone, because we didn't believe them. So, and then so that was a whole nother journey in terms of flying on the plane with all of these power electronics and battery systems.
Did you
And
get funny looks
then
from the airport security?
yeah, and then Alex, yeah, I mean, we ran in, this is in TSA, we had some run-ins with them and some of our tools and battery systems. But then we finally get there and we have enough, we have to get to some other tools that were lost, that were banned into the TSA and that kind of stuff. And then it was putting it all together in our hotel room that night. And so we ended up landing, it was kind of a late night flight. We get to the hotel room at like 2 a.m. And at 8 a.m, they wanted to pick us up, and so at that time we had to then do the full integration, because you had to tear it apart to kind of fly with it, and then putting it there, launching it on the TV show. And side note, if anyone ever watches that show, it's All American Makers. It's titled Catch Me If You Can. You can find it on YouTube. It's 30 minutes and there's like 4 different startup companies. But I am terrible at reality TV show, is what I found. Like during the show, looking to the left of me and seeing this guy that had this really corny smile, and just it's not a smile that you would have in normal real life, right? But then you watch the show and you like see my I have RBF the whole time, just staring down the camera, looking really intimidating, and this guy looks really friendly, right? And so lesson learned about that. But you're going to see Alex and I having quite the adventure on that show. But coming out of the show, we people watched it, and we found an initial market, which was trade show and exhibit halls. And then so long story short is that show really kind of was the launch of Joule Case, and allowed us to find these customers that allowed us to kind of iterate this as I described.
So when so after being on the show, they got you the visibility you wanted, and then people started investing into your crowdfunding campaign. Is that right?
Well, so at that point, the crowdfunding campaign's been closed, and
I
we
see.
actually we hit some. Well, we set a high target that we didn't meet, and
Okay.
we were fortunate that it didn't launch, because I've also seen that where a startup, you have maybe a low goal or something like that, and then now you're obligated to have with these customers, and it just doesn't work out, right?
I see.
And it becomes incredibly difficult. So we found these business customers that reached out and wanted to buy it just for their own processes, and they're used to paying a little bit up front, or purchase orders, inventory, invoicing, and there's a float to that and everything like that. And then so these customers allowed us to get money up front, build the product, and then deliver this on the back end, which was tremendous for us, and not that Joule Case is trying to become a B2B product, right? It's really designed to be a product for everyone, all consumers, all businesses. But for kind of the first 4 evolutions of the product were kind of allowed us to iterate this, evolve this based on these initial customers of trade shows.
And how many of these customers did you have to talk to find out what plan or what, I guess, MVP would suit multiple users and not just that specific business?
Well, um, it was building MVPs that, well, in plural, but building our MVP really solved for one niche application when we wanted to build something greater.
I see.
So as we kept this conversation, open, I'm sorry,
No worries.
uh, it it solved for an initial, hey, here's this customer, here's an exhibit, but then realizing that it's not going to solve for these other customers. And and then yeah, you could build a company around this focused little area and like, oh, this is what we can do. But we didn't think that that was going to be nearly exciting. That wasn't going to be, that's going to be a business that gets quickly replaced. As a hardware company, that's going to be very quickly, race to the bottom. There's no way that
Hmm.
an American hardware company is going to win in something like that, right? So you have to rise above that, and you have to, really imagine something that is incredibly difficult, and as a very, expansive vision, for us at least, that allowed us then to, the reason why it took so many of these different versions is that realizing, okay, now this one solves for both this and this and this. Oh, there's another one, there's another customer over here, we need to solve for that. So now here comes the third version, right? Now here comes the fourth version, and that kind of stuff. So
Can you elaborate on
um,
those differences between the versions in terms of what was added and what was removed?
um, so each one's got a little bit of a different look, touch, feel, industrial design. The connection hardware has evolved, and now we've landed on that connection hardware, and it's pretty set in stone in terms of having this architecture. But there was a design around that. The latching, the ability to make it so that it's a very intuitive, stackability. Right. So as a customer, we don't have to describe that it's the Lego blocks of power. It's going to be the battery chemistry. So we use multiple different types of chemistry, from filled acid, nickel metal hydride, lithium ion NMC, to lithium ion phosphate as well. So there's a lot of different battery chemistries. There's different power outputs. So an inverter, and there's different power types. So pure sine wave versus modified sine wave, 600 watts, 1200 watts,
Hmm.
5,000 watts of power. It's the user interface. So what that customer is actually going to see in terms of what they need to see in terms of, maybe do they want to see power? Do they want to see energy? What's important for them as they view this? It's, the list goes on, but those are a couple examples.
Hmm. And are you the one responsible for all of these engineering changes?
That is all on Alex now.
Oh, huh.
And that's been interesting. Yeah. So I'm the guy with the PE, the professional engineering stamp. It's mechanical, of course, right? But I like to say I have some pretty good engineering chops, but I don't do any of the engineering anymore. So as the CEO of the company, I deal with investors. I'm imagining kind of the bigger picture, managing the team, building the company culture, the hiring, the firing, all of these like kind of big picture things. And then Alex can kind of, he dives into the product, and he lives, breathes, imagines this future. And then, we've been very fortunate to hire Dave DeMuro. And Dave comes to us from Apple. So he's 10 years at Apple, being the battery engineer, right? The product manager, the battery engineer that designs all of the power systems from the Apple Watch, iPad, MacBook,
Hmm.
so on and so forth. And he's got almost 20 patents to his name around kind of this consumer power side of it. And now he can be that, that really true engineer. So he's the vice president of engineering right now, but then he manages the whole engineering team as they continue to build towards what Alex is kind of leading it on a, the high level visionary sense. And then there's a translating that and then executing that.
And how did you happen to come across? Yeah, did you have former connections to the dude, or did you hire him? Like, how did you attract him to join your company? Like, what do you think made it a sweet deal for him?
Um, I mean, it's having him get on board with the vision of what we're trying to build, right? It's having him understand how exciting and how massive an idea this is.
Hmm.
And he's not just leaving Apple for anyone, but now he's leaving it for a startup and being an employee where there's less than 10 of us now, right? There's less than 10 of us right now, and so he's one of the founding employees, and it's a sweet, it's a terrific fit for him in terms of his skill set and what he's all learned. And now he can kind of dabble in the startup journey or the startup adventure that he's been with Apple and then Texas Instruments before that. So much more of these large stodgy corporations, and now it's a very fast, nimble, you don't know what tomorrow's going to hold.
Earlier, you mentioned that culture is in your domain of responsibility. Like, how would you describe your culture today, and where do you want it to go?
I think that culture is incredibly important, and I try to think about that as much as I can. And in the whirlwind and the urgency, sometimes you lose sight of that important thing, right? But I would say the culture at Joule Case is, you know, every person will have an impact on that culture, whether you intend it or not.
Mhm.
And then so as we hire more people, it's understanding that person is going to have an impact on that culture. And I will point to something, and I will model this, and then it will also have impressions from Alex and from Pete, our chief operating officer, or from anyone else. But I want it to be very thoughtful. I want it to be very professional. I want it to be a team environment, and I want it to have the expectation that we never let that customer down, right? And then also to be very in tune with them. So understanding that your ear is to the ground and you're constantly touching base with that customer. You're not just building something out there in the vacuum, but what's that customer telling you? But then you're being very professional about it, and professional in terms of what's being communicated, delivering on timelines, delivering on expectations, and that's across the board. And I need to do that as the CEO in terms of I say, this is what we're going to do as a team. That's credibility for me, and that needs to kind of go down the line as we talk with the entire team.
You mentioned earlier that you're a team of sub 10. Is that right?
Yes.
What was the order of the first few hires, and would you do it the same way if you were to do it over again?
I mean, absolutely, I would do it differently. So of course, I don't think anyone, I don't know if you could ever say that otherwise, but um, there's uh, there's a I'd say a couple things. First is that along a startup journey, there's different people that have different strengths or skill sets for different stages.
Hmm.
And there's some people that we had on the team that as you continue to grow and evolve, may not have another way to phrase this is that the company is going to change a lot quicker than a person
Right.
potentially can change, right? So it's a different dynamic. As if you're working for Apple, you as a person are going to change way faster than what Apple is going to change, even as Apple, right? But if you're working for General Electric, Wells Fargo, right, like that's a very slow moving organization. Startup, you can't keep up with it as a person. And so you have to commit to understand that you are going to be constantly changed and evolved. And if you don't, then Joule Case has grown beyond you. And that's fine too, right? And not to say this is, pejorative, good, bad, or different, but if this is a great spot for you right now, that's great. But that's all it means is it's a great spot for you right now. And tomorrow it could be very different because, that call that I just had right before this suddenly changes your whole company and your company dynamic. So as we got going, there were a lot of people that joined the team that joined, because they shared that enthusiasm and that
Hmm.
passion and that excitement, right? And then as you keep going, Um, you know, it is making sure that each new hire really raises the bar. And then so as we bring in another person, that person can't just be another person to check the box. That person needs to raise that knowledge, domain expertise, the professionalism, the deliverables, all of this. Otherwise, they haven't done their job, and you're not growing the organization. You're being stagnant and like, oh, we just hired another person because this person's just like this, this other person. So it's important to understand that, and there's a balance, because I think there's been a couple times that we've hired people that we knew that we were going to need down the road, but it was, you want to hire for, a couple years out. But I think there's also a couple times that we hired faster than what we should, that they're far more qualified than what we really need at the time. And you can see down the picture, but that doesn't change what that actually means for today, right? So you have to, slowly build up there. But, I'm incredibly fortunate. I feel incredibly fortunate to have the team that we have. And I want to continue to hire people that are smarter, more talented than I am.
And you mentioned earlier that hiring is something you also focus on. How do you find, like, what is your strategy to hiring the best, especially when you're that incredibly critical stage of your company's life cycle?
So always be hiring, always be talking to people, always be thinking about what the next, 5 hires are, and then see what's out there, and
Hmm.
then leverage your resources around that, right? So I think startups, at least for Joule Case, we have a lot of raving fans and supporters, right? So there's a lot of inbound customers that get sent our way from a raving fan, from an investor, from a friend that just loves to see the journey. Also employee candidates as well. And the vast majority, it's not the right fit. It's just not the right timing or whatever. But some of these people like Pete or Dave have been tremendous.
That's really cool. In terms of, I guess taking a step back, like what would you say is what is do you have a like root value as a person, like I guess independent of the company that drives you to be where you are today?
Yeah. Um, you know, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I want to, like, I'm very much kind of I want to execute. I want to, build stuff, and I just want it to go. And then so, I'm not an imaginative person in the sense that Alex is. Alex is an incredibly creative, imaginative person that, can take, these varied problems that are complex and distill them down and come up with a very simple, elegant solution, which is, tremendous. But, I will, if there's a conversation and someone says, okay, let's go do that, it now becomes like set in stone for me, and now you got to go execute around it, right? So, you know, if there isn't a sense of, pride, there isn't a sense of trying to, be the smartest person in the room. The only thing that I really care about is doing what I've set out to do. And then so being, do I want to set out to build Joule Case? And I made the decision many years ago that I did. And then I'm very determined to make that happen, right? And then so it's not about me, right? It's not about Alex. It's about building this company. And I think that, if you don't have hubris about, that it's got to be you or anything like that, but that you just, you want to work together as a bigger team, that means you can build a better team. That also
Hmm.
means that you can, maybe proceed when someone else gets hung up on some sort of, minor slight, something like that. So, I have a good amount of patience. I don't, I have pretty thick skin, and I want to just, more than anything, build out Joule Case.
Are the traits that you listed something that you have been inherent in you as a person, from I guess as long as you can remember, or are they things that you intentionally built up over the years?
I think what I just described there are very intentional. I'm sorry, inherent
Mm.
to who I am. That's always kind of been there for me. You certainly learn, in the startup journey, probably more than anything, you learn about yourself, first and foremost, right? So just you realize what kind of person you are as you go into the fire, into the a startup world, understanding what you're capable of, or maybe what you're not. And then so something that I have become more and more comfortable with is the uncertainty of a startup. So just coming from my parents both worked for the Department of Energy at a national lab, right? So they're both engineers, full careers in government service, just building, doing research around, so there's a lot of certainty, and there's a lot of nothing's very dynamic, and then so I had a background of needing to have things very be set in stone, to be it so it's permanent, and I have now become very comfortable with not real like just letting the company just go where it needs to go, and maybe you don't know how you're gonna get the funding round closed, because you don't know how you're gonna meet your sales projections, because you're setting them out and you don't know. And I'm getting more and more comfortable with that.
Is that something you feel like you get comfortable because you're in that position, or do you feel like there's certain advice um, early stage entrepreneurs or soon to be entrepreneurs can go through to prepare themselves before that ahead of time?
I think I think you need to be going through it, but I think that you have to uh, understand what you're going to be thrown into. And I, before I quit my corporate job, I had many sleepless nights just kind of thinking about like what this would really mean, and suddenly not having that paycheck, right? Not having the benefits, and thinking through what this all meant, and then thinking why I wanted to do it, thinking about what would be the what's kind of the no go, right? So
Mm.
what milestones, and maybe I'm not hitting it, do I just say, okay, well, I tried it, and that didn't work, and now I'm going to go find another job again, right? And that was incredibly uncomfortable, right? So you just have to understand that that's going to be incredibly uncomfortable, and if you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, then you can go along this journey. But if you can't, or you can't change, then it's going to be incredibly difficult to be a startup founder.
Do you have any advice that you would give to a past version of yourself if they were
Hmm.
receptive to advice?
A lot of advice. Yeah. What would I mean? So much. I think if I were to kind of distill that down to maybe one comment, or just one. mm, I would say, um, yeah, that's and I think I've had different answers to that question throughout the years.
Okay.
I think right now, what I would say is maybe, and it's funny because I talk about laying this foundation, and this foundation that's been 6 years, right? But even then, I think that there's been a couple times that we've really, ramped up. So I think actually, the advice that I would share with is patience. And there's been some times that we have been patient, and it's been really rewarding, and sometimes I haven't demonstrated patience in terms of the timeline or what it takes to deliver to a customer, and just understanding that be patient about that. And in a startup, everything is going to take far longer, and it's going to cost way more than you imagine. And having understanding that, I understand that now, but if you're in the throes of it, and you've now committed yourself to this, and it's not delivering the results that you thought, in some sort of arbitrary sense, because I'm being completely arbitrary in my milestones, but I've set these arbitrary milestones and now I'm not hitting them because it always takes longer. That patience is very key, and having patience for yourself, patience in terms of customer development, product development. You got to do everything you can. So there's a balance there, but um, every company, every startup that I know, it always takes a far longer than what's originally planned.
So you mentioned how the answer to that question changed over the years. Is it is What are some of the previous variants or what are the previous answers in previous years, and what makes you feel like the answer changed?
Um, because you deal with immediate stuff right then, right? So it is so for example, and maybe it's a slight just difference, not a significant difference, but the slight difference is just, you know, a hey, you got this, right? Like, hey, go and get it done. Having the confidence in your abilities. There's a balance between um, the strategic conversations that you can have with investors or with a strategic partner, and you can have too many of them, you can have too little. But if you are having one, be focused on that and deliver that as well. That's kind of some past experience I'd have where, if you're trying to discount, an exciting conversation because you're like, okay, that's great, they show promise, but I need five other conversations going on just so that the pipeline delivers one, right? That kind of thing as well. So you're going to need to have so many of these strategic customers or investors in the pipeline, but I think there's such a thing as having too many of them as well.
Hmm. And earlier you were mentioning different things that you value as a leader within yourself. But if you were to I guess, describe characteristics, traits, beliefs independent of yourself, what would you say makes for a good leader?
I think the biggest attribute is that ability to be that servant leader. I think in being a leader, it's not about you ever. It's about what you're trying to lead and what you're trying to build. And I just when I stumble across a leader that's not a servant leader, and all of these, there's many different styles, and you can certainly go about it a lot of different ways. But I get incredibly turned off if
Hmm.
someone is selfish about their leadership or selfish about what they're trying to do, and I won't follow them.
Hmm.
And in terms of people that I want to work with, I'm emulating this servant leadership, and it's being reflected in the company as a whole as well, right? And so, at any point in time that there's a leader that is not in line with the company values, I think that's one of the most important roles is me as a CEO long term, right? I mean, at less than 10 people, it's not like I need to really think about this right now, but I need to axe out that cancer as quickly as possible, and that's something that I view as one of the most important things that I can do as a CEO is to protect that culture,
Gotcha.
and then also aim that trajectory, right? Be that visionary and describe where we're going to go as a company. Those are the two big things as a CEO.
Okay. Well, I've been very grateful for this past hour. I just want to close out our call on just one final question I'd like to ask all of our guests. If For all of our guests who may be interested in reaching out or following along in your journey, what's the best way they can do so?
Yeah, thank you. Would love to be in touch.
Absolutely.
Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can follow Joule Case itself as well, right on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and you can kind of see what we're doing. We're very excited to have events coming back, and there's some very large, exciting announcements that are be coming out here shortly in terms of us replacing the dirty generators for events. But connect with me on LinkedIn, message me. And I would love to connect with fellow startup founders. That's how I really learn and benchmark. And I'm only here because of other startup entrepreneurs that gave their time to answer my questions, and I want to do the same.
It's great to hear. And we'll definitely have all those links as well as a link to the YouTube video you were talking about earlier in the landing page. Thanks again for your
Terrific.
time.
Thank you.